All right, you guys, welcome back to season 4 of the Jester Section Hiker Podcast. I am your host, Julie Jester Gayheart, and we are back. And right now, if you're listening to the audio version, this is actually being recorded live on YouTube. And my guest I have with me today, we have to do some sound checks. So before we get rolling, Paul, can you hear me? I think you are on mute. This is what happens when you go live, people. I've got y'all set up, Paul, but for some reason, you are on mute. And this, my friends, is what happens when you go live. So this morning, while Paul and I figure this out, in the chat, we have Carissa. So, hey, Carissa. We have Stella. And we have, it looks like Skunk Ape is in the chat. So good to see you, Skunk Ape. And looks like we have a few people joining us here this Sunday morning. And I'm going to go over some announcements while Paul is still trying to figure out why he is muted on his end. I'm going to try something on my end. Yeah, that's weird, Paul. I don't know what's going on. All right. So while you're trying to figure that out, we are live. I've got some announcements. Paul, what you may have to do is hang up and call me back. And while we're doing that, I'm going to go over some announcements. If you guys have any questions, go ahead and put them in the chat. And again, this is the risk that you take when you go live for technical difficulties and stuff that goes wrong. And it's always edited out of the podcast and nobody really knows. Paul is calling back. I'm going to assign him to where he needs to go in my software, and he's still on mute. Some reason, Paul, you should be able to unmute yourself on your end with your sound. I don't know if you are using Google Chrome, but you may have to actually go into your Google Chrome and unmute yourself and make sure your sound is good there. And while Paul is doing that, maybe I need to unmute you. Nope, he's muted. He's unmuted. I have you unmuted, Paul. So I don't know. So whatever's going on, we'll figure it out. But you guys, just a couple announcements while Paul is figuring that out. I want to remind everybody that this season, season 4, we've titled the season The Positive Impact Season, and we are going to 2 episodes a month. And those episodes will release on the 1st and the 3rd Saturday of the month. So again, we are going to 2 episodes a month, down from an episode coming out every Saturday. And when those episodes release, I'm cheating today, you guys, too. See, I have a big notepad with notes because last time I actually forgot some stuff. And that's another beauty of going live. You can see everything that's going on. And right now I see Paul in a panic trying to figure out how to turn his audio on. But anyway, we will continue with the announcements. I know he's saying, I don't know. But so yeah, the podcast is going to release 2 times a month this season, the 1st and the 3rd Saturday. There will be an audio version and a video version. And what we're going to do for the video version is we are going to re-release the live. So anybody that wants to watch the re-release, you can find this over on my YouTube channel at Julie Gayheart. Pretty easy, and you'll get to see all the unedited and everything that's happening right now and have a lot of fun while Paul is still trying to figure out his audio. And who knows, maybe we won't record today. You never know. We'll have to try to figure this out. So if you want to be part of the live recordings, you can subscribe on YouTube. You can go over to the channel, Julie Gayheart, hit subscribe, hit the bell notifications, and then you'll be made aware of when we are going live. And another simple way is you can email me, jester@jestersectionhiker.com. and I'll send you an email link. I've got an email list going 24 hours prior to going live. I send out a link, and if you want to be on that email, just shoot me an email and I'll add you to the list. And one major thing that I forgot last time, let me make sure I'm pointing. Nope, not pointing to it right. Nope. Over here is some new podcast artwork. So for those of you that are watching the live version, January 1st, I released new podcast artwork. I twisted it up a little bit. I put a poll out, I think it was early November, asking, what people liked as far as the podcast artwork. And I had some new artwork done. So hopefully you guys enjoy it. So the official podcast artwork change January 1st. I've got new artwork on my social media sites. I've got new artwork on YouTube, and it's been a lot of fun putting that together. And you guys, Paul is completely gone, so I'm not sure what the deal is. And I wanted to remind you guys, last week's episode, we had on Austin, and we also had on Benny Braden with Responsible Stewardship. And you guys heard last week that Austin and I are officially starting a new company, and the company is titled Alternate Route Media. And we are official. We have received our official LLC paperwork. So we are an official company. And Thursday, January 26th in the evening, we are going to be having our first live podcast episode where we're going to be coming on and talking to you how the company got started, why we decided to do what we are doing, and give you some ins and outs of what we are going to be doing over at Alternate Route Media in 2023. And the podcast is called the Alternate Route Podcast. So that is all I have for the updates. And you guys, Paul is completely gone. And I see on here, Stella says, don't panic, technology. So if anybody is left in the chat, if you guys have questions for me while I try to get Paul back on, otherwise, here, I'm not sure what to do. We might just turn this into Ask Jester What You Want and see if Paul will come back on. And it's hard for me to tell. It looks like we have 4 people watching. So if you guys have questions, fire away and we will get to it. So January 2023, Alternate Route Media. Here comes Paul. Sorry, you guys. I saw him coming in and, oh, wait a minute. Is he actually live? Wait a minute.
I'm on my phone.
Oh my God, Paul, we can see you and we can hear you.
It's a miracle. I had to use my phone. I don't know what's going on with the computer, but we're going to make it work.
We're going to make it work.
Sorry about that.
No worries. Your audio is off, but you know what? We're going to roll with it. So, yeah.
Sometimes you got to roll with it live.
Sometimes you got to roll with it. I've given all mine. I've given everything I could think of, announcements and everything that's going on with the podcast in 2023. And Paul, I see you're in your studio. This is going to be fun. We can see his audio, which is great. Okay, perfect. Carissa, thank you. So Carissa says, wow, see how this pops. See, you're missing out, Paul. See how all these comments, they just pop up there. So Carissa says, your audio is fine. We can see you. You look good. You're in your studio. So I am going to do a total reintroduction. I don't know if Skunk Ape is still on here, but the gentleman that actually edits the audio version of the show is on here, and he is going to have a really fun time with this one. So you guys, no worries. Without further ado, please welcome to the podcast. Paul, it has been a long time coming. My apologies. I should have had you on a long time ago. You guys, Paul is an AT completer. He is highly into conservation. He's an outdoor enthusiast. And I'm pretty sure there's nothing that you don't do in the outdoors. He's a podcaster. He has made short films, documentaries, all kinds of stuff. And I really, really enjoy your channel, Aptitude Outdoors. So with a lot of technical difficulty, you guys, Mr. Paul Fuzinski, give him a thumbs up in the
Hi.
chat.
Wow, that was quite the intro. Thanks, Julie.
You are welcome. You are welcome. And you guys, I got to show you this. I mean, well, I can't show you the details of the list, but I have, tons and tons of questions for you, Paul.
All right.
So here we go. Let's just get started. And I want to, okay, so you completed the Appalachian Trail in 2015, but
Correct.
before we get to that, and you probably don't want to talk about this, and this is why I'm going to bring it up. This is the fun of it. So Paul just released a documentary about Bigfoot.
Surely did.
Yeah.
Of course I want to talk about it.
Yeah. So let's talk about your most recent documentary, Bigfoot. And do you actually believe there's a Bigfoot?
I personally do not believe there's a Bigfoot, but I love the culture of Bigfoot, and I love, like, it's just so interesting because, you know, like you, for instance, you spend a lot of time on the Appalachian Trail, you spend a lot of time outdoors, hiking, backpacking, all this stuff. And I think a lot of it is fanciful and fun, and I just love it. And I think it's just a wild ride going to meet all these people. So personally, I do not believe in Bigfoot. I might get in trouble for saying that, putting out a Bigfoot documentary, but I've also read a lot of books and spent a lot of time in the woods. And I just don't have any reason to believe that it's real unless I see one. So that we'll knock that one out right away.
So take us back to the title. What is the actual title of your documentary about Bigfoot?
It's called Finding the Fouke Monster, and it was in Fouke, Arkansas, which is very historically popular place for Bigfoot. It's like where the legend of Foggy Creek was shot and all of that stuff. So I was down in Arkansas for actually doing some work. I was filming a presentation for one of my friends at the Fouke Monster Festival. And there's just a bunch of people there. I'm like, let's go out and do some Bigfooting. You're all into this Bigfoot stuff. And I interviewed a couple of them, and it just turned into this little mini documentary that I made. And it was a blast. I would definitely love to do it again. It was just weird and fun, and being outside the dark with people.
These Bigfoot people, okay, I'm not gonna say either way if I'm into Bigfoot or not into Bigfoot. But the people that are, they're serious. So
they're serious.
Several years ago, I was out doing a little section on the AT down in Dahlonega, Georgia. This was probably 2012, 2013. And the hostel I was staying at, it's called the Hiker Hostel. It is no longer the Hiker Hostel. But for those of you that got a chance to stay there, it was an amazing place before they actually sold the hostel. And while I was down there, the place was filled up with Bigfoot enthusiasts that were actually planning, what they were going to do when they went out that evening. And when I was watching your documentary, it took me back to that place where I'm like, man, they actually call Bigfoot. It's like a thing.
Yeah. Yeah. It is wild to be out in the middle of the dark. Like, if you watch it, I have a night vision camera on, but it is so dark. You can't see your hand in front of your face. And there's people out there just screaming at full volume. It's just kind of eerie in that sense. And then you don't know a lot of these people. I had just met them for the first time while I was down there. And it was just kind of like one of those things, like, what am I doing here? Like, why am I out here? Why am I doing this? But at the end, everyone was really fun. They were really nice people. They were very willing to talk about it openly, and they're not ashamed of Bigfoot. Like, a lot of people are kind of leery of their hobbies and stuff sometimes, or they're embarrassed. Like, they're in it. They love it. And I respect that. Maybe Bigfoot is real and I just am a Debbie Downer, but I just want to see it if it's real. And I will continue to make Bigfoot stuff, even though it's kind of taboo in the conservation world. People kind of look at you weird, but I don't care. You only get one life to live, so you might as well have fun,
That's right. And that's one of the reasons I like you, Paul, because you don't care. You don't care if we have technical difficulties. It is what it is. You and I have been doing this a while. And in the chat, somebody put, you got to believe. So there you go.
There it is.
So we were leaving on that note. You guys go over to Paul's channel, Aptitude Outdoors, and watch the Fouke Monster. There you go.
Yeah.
So
watch it. It's fun.
in this timeline of conversation with you today, I want to go way back. So I want to go back. Prior to 2015, you actually, I don't know if you were married before you decided to hike the AT. So talk us through your journey in going out to the AT in 2015. You and your wife now, your current wife, you guys completed the Appalachian Trail. So let's go back and start there.
Sweet. Yeah. So let's see, 2000. Well, we can go really far back. When I was a teenager, I got right out of high school. We bought a van and we traveled. My band and we were playing music all over the country. We played out in the West Coast. We played through the middle of the United States. We played through up and down the East Coast, through Texas, all these places as like a native Ohioan I had never been to before. And I mean, I grew up in the outdoors. So my dad, it was like a dream of his to go out and have this property up in Michigan or somewhere kind of remote. So we go up there. We grew up there. We lived in the woods. We basically lived in this swampy marsh land. So I like grew up outdoors. We were, splitting wood as kids and we just had a general sense of the outdoors. So I'm lucky in the fact that I got to spend a ton of time outside as a kid. But then as I get older, you lose interest. It's like when you grow up somewhere, you don't care. You don't want to do anything anymore in the small town America. So you have these aspirations. So I go out on the road, see all this cool stuff. And that kind of awoke in my passion for the outdoors. I think that's where the spark struck. And then it's been a wildfire ever since. I mean, as a 17-year-old getting to see the redwoods for the first time and going out to these big, vast deserts, Rocky Mountains, it's like, I can't believe how much stuff there is to see out here. And then I get home, go to college and work in this like factory job at a concrete factory to pay for school. And I just wasn't like digging it. I really liked what I did in school. I got an anthropology degree, which is basically a degree in how to learn to interview people, which has panned out pretty well, I guess, as a podcaster. and I just read a book, I think, about the Appalachian Trail, and I'm kind of like an obsessive person. So when I get into something, I'm like in. I read like the history of Appalachia. I was reading all this stuff about like the whole shebang. I read every book that I could get my hands on about through hiking. And then I didn't have any experience backpacking at all. I had never really been backpacking. I was just kind of a general, liked going outside and being outdoors. And my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, we were just like, let's just do this. Like I'm graduating college. I have this window where I can just quit my job and we can just do this and then figure out what we want to do, which we still haven't figured out what we want to do. But so essentially from there, it was just, I graduated. I skipped my graduation. I did not go to like college graduation, which is like a huge ordeal for a lot of people. They're like, it's a big life highlight. I was like, peace. I'm going to Georgia. And everybody thought I was insane. They still do think I'm insane. And then it was just a matter of not stopping until we got to Maine. I mean, that's my mindset with a lot of things. Like if you're going to do it, just do it. Just wake up and go. And it was fun. I loved through hiking. It's like one of the highlights of my life. Obviously, if you're watching, the backpack behind me is my Appalachian Trail backpack that I used to through hike. Everybody tells me I should send it back and get a new one because Osprey will replace your stuff. I'm like, you couldn't pay me to send that thing back. That's like a lifelong relic. So I don't know how if you want to get into the Appalachian Trail itself, but that was how I got started. That's where the passion came from. It's just kind of something I heard about, like a lot of people. They hear about it and they go, oh my God, I want to do that. And then I just did it.
Awesome. So 2015, for those that have been listening to the podcast for a long time, that was supposed to be the year that I was actually going to finish my section hike. So in the summer of 2015, we had to have been on the trail at the same time because I did 1,000 miles that summer. So when was my projected finish date was going to be September 15th. So when did you actually summit?
We summited on October 24th.
Oh, wow.
And it was cold.
I was going to say, that's a story in itself.
Yeah. Well, the thing is I had the window for college, so I didn't graduate until May. So like that's when I had to start. I was just had to do it in May. So I go down there and I'm very, very stubborn as a person. Like I am very like incredibly stubborn. So I was like, traditional AT through hike, south to north. That's what I'm doing. I don't care what anybody tells me. I'm doing it regardless. So uh, the whole time you're down there, even from day one, which is when you need the most encouragement, people are like, dude, you're not going to make it to the end. You're not going to make it. There's no way. And I'm like, I mean, essentially at the end of the day, you're just walking. Like, it's really not like, I mean, it's strenuous and hard and takes a lot of like physical ability, but you're still just walking. Like, you can walk until your legs fall off, you just keep putting that foot in front. I was like, I think I'll be okay. And, a lot of people have a very negative outlook. They're like, oh, there's no way. So you get, long story short, we get to there. We are on Mount Katahdin and there's people up there like, I don't think you're going to finish this through hike. I'm like, I'm literally here. We're at the finish line. Like, I'm on the mountain. Like, oh, it's really icy up there. I was like, I've been hiking through ice for like 2 weeks. I don't give a crap. So
that's right.
Listen,
I like haters, man. Haters fuel me.
Yeah.
They fuel me to do better.
Yes, they really do. And it was just ironic because like I'm literally standing on Mount Katahdin. They're like, yeah, there's no way. Like, it's just ice. Like, it could take all day to climb up the mountain and come back down. But I mean, I'm going to finish. It's not, I don't know. There's so many myths about Mount Katahdin. Like, they close the mountain and all this stuff that you hear religiously. And like, I'm proof that that's not the case. I mean, unless it's life threatening, like blizzards and you're going to like literally die, they don't close the mountain. They're just like, if you die, we're not going to come save you. Like, that's on you. Sorry.
Right. They don't close Katahdin. Katahdin does not close. It's just different permitting and different things. So listen, we've got a couple questions for you. So my buddy Skunk Ape, he wants to know, did you use a tent or a hammock?
Tent. Well, we use it.
End of story. Tent, right?
Yeah. Sorry. We had, well, it was my girlfriend at the time, my wife now, we were doing it together. So we just shared a tent, and hammocks were still like not that popular yet when we, like in 2015 we started. They were like, I feel like they were like underground punk rock for a long time, and now they're like, a lot of people just hammock a lot, and I enjoy hammocking. I have nothing against it. I use my hammock quite a bit actually if I'm like solo camping, but the tent just kind of allows more privacy for me, especially on a long hike like that. You don't have any privacy because you're surrounded by people all the time. So I mean, we used a tent for sure. It was just an ultralight 2-person backpacking tent. And one thing I learned is a tent is like ×1. So like whatever you think that you like, it says for 2 people, you need a 3-person tent if you're going to be out there for that long, because you're sleeping next to someone this close all the time, 24/7 every day. And you're like, this is too tight. So we went through a couple tents, but the bigger the better for a 2-person setup. Sounds like you guys still got married,
so it worked, right?
Yeah. Bonding time.
And we got another one. So Alonda wants to know, she says, Paul, what did you learn on the through hike that has stuck with you until now?
I love that question. That's my favorite question. The thing that I learned, like when I was a kid, I was very timid and like not outgoing. And I'm still kind of like, I know it's hard to believe because I do the podcast and I'm always talking and stuff, but I'm like a very reserved and quiet person on my own. Like, I don't go to parties and do a lot of like outside stuff outside of the outdoors. Like, I'm just kind of like a homebody. And I've learned it's like you can build confidence and you don't have to be scared of things. Like a lot of people, we live in this world where we're surrounded by stress continuously of, work. There's bills, there's credit cards, there's Christmas time coming up like we're in right now, buying gifts and stuff. And a lot of that stuff just doesn't really matter at the end of the day, because when you live out of a backpack for 6 months, you realize you don't really need that much. So like if everything collapses, everything falls apart, at the end of the day, you're like, you can just rebuild it all and start over again. It's not the end of the world. Like, obviously don't want that to happen, but I mean, it just gives you this sense of freedom, I think is what I learned overall. Like, you can sit down for a minute if you get stressed, and like, I did this crazy thing that everybody said I was insane for doing, and everything worked out fine. There were struggles, there was strife, but that's life, So that's my biggest takeaway is like, you can learn to be confident and you can learn to be, free essentially when you don't have to worry about like the drudgery of life. Once you kind of break that, that's what through hiking did for me anyway. It kind of broke that mental barrier of being scared to do things, you know.
And obviously, after you got back from your through hike, you weren't scared to start Aptitude Outdoors. You weren't scared to start a podcast. So talk us through kind of that transition. You finish your hike, you decide you want to do a podcast. And I was actually on episode number 10. I watched our episode the other day. I said, oh my God, we were such babies. We were like baby podcasters.
Talk about technical difficulties too. I had no idea what I was doing. And yeah, so that whole process, I mean, Aptitude Outdoors was kind of just this thing that came out of my brain because after a through hike, you're kind of like reconditioning yourself to live in this world again, like in society, because out there it's just like the Wild West. You know, people are doing whatever they want. You have all this freedom and time, and you get home and you have to start thinking about stuff like, I got to get a job. I have to, you know, find somewhere to live. I have to find, you know, somewhere I can rent and start kind of rebuilding your life around like your new self post through hike.
And I got a question for you on that, because as you were talking, whenever I got done with like a log section hike, even the first time I went into a gas station, it was just overwhelming. It was too much. It was like, I don't want to be around people. It was just like, I needed to go in, and all I wanted to do was like get a candy bar or maybe some ice cream. And I just couldn't figure it out. It's weird.
Yes. It's weird. It's culture shock, like 101 when they talk about that. When I was in school, anthropology, I was like, what do you mean culture shock? Like, how could you go somewhere and then feel different about it? It's like it all makes sense after a through hike, like complete culture shock. It's just things that used to be normal are weird. Like, I don't want to go to the grocery store. Like, that sucks. I don't want to be surrounded by all these people and be in like, even when you hike for like a week or 2 weeks or something, you go out there and you start smelling like car exhaust fumes through the city and stuff. You're like, this is terrible. Or even things like deodorant and stuff are just overpowering after that. You're like, I can't handle
when somebody
all
walks
this
by
stuff.
You on the trail, you're like, you just took a shower and loaded yourself up with whatever cologne.
Axe body spray. So it is a weird transition. It really is. Once you're out there that long, it's just like, come home and everything's weird. It's just like you don't feel like you fit back into society. You're like a feral animal.
No, I still don't think I fit in society. I kind of, no. It's like every day I get up, and a friend of mine that I used to hike with a long time ago, she had this saying, and I say it every once in a while. It's like every day is like Halloween until I can be like out on the trail or out doing or kayaking or whatever. It's like I feel like every morning I get all dressed up, and it's like Halloween because it's not me.
I feel that 100%. I really do feel that. That's the best way I've ever heard it put, honestly. It just feels weird.
So let's get into this podcast thing. So you summit in October, you and your girlfriend are frozen, you come back and you say, hey, let's do this Aptitude Outdoors. Let's get into this podcast.
Yeah. So it started as a blog. Like, it was like the big thing in 2015, blogging. And I didn't even know what a podcast was. And I was doing a lot of like, I knew I didn't want to work a normal job. I mean, you have to. So I was like, how can I like keep the outdoors thing rolling? And for a while I had this like local television show about the outdoors because they found out I did this through hike, and it was like just local cable thing. And that kind of just like, I don't know, fizzled out. It didn't really go anywhere. So I wanted to like, I met all these cool people locally that I was learning about my own area because I spent so much time traveling and trying to find the outdoors in other places. I was like, why am I not doing this at home? So I started through the TV show talking to all these local professionals and wildlife professionals and parks people and explorers from Toledo area of Ohio. And it's like, well, the podcast is essentially the same thing, but we're not like going out in the outdoors and doing this big intensive filming. It's just like having this cool conversation, and started the podcast actually upstairs of where I'm at right now in this tiny little room. It was orange and it was bad. And I do it at home too. And now kind of obviously I'm here in a studio and I can't even get my equipment to work, which is great. But it just, you know how it is, Julie. You just like, you start it and then it becomes this machine and you're like, I don't even remember
Yeah.
doing
I
this.
mean,
Like,
look
how did
at
it
me.
become this monster? Yeah,
Yeah.
I remember. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like 3 months ago, I was like, I just don't even think I'm going to podcast anymore. I know.
We all get there.
I know.
It's a lot of work. I mean, not to be a whiner, but it is a lot of work. It's like my new Appalachian Trail, you know, it's like you got to wake up and get the work done or it's those shows aren't going to come out themselves, you know. So I really love it though. I get to talk to really awesome people and I've got to it's taken me to some pretty wild places. And I'm like a just jump in foot first kind of guy. I'll just like go and do whatever. And it's taken me all over the country. I've been to Texas, you know, I've been to obviously Fouke, Arkansas. I met that guy through podcasting. I've done, you know, work all over. I've been to the Adirondacks up in New York. I've done so much like cool stuff just through the podcast. And it's awesome. It's a great networking tool. And it's just hopefully giving out information that helps people learn because I like to learn. And that's what a podcast is, learning and telling stories. So
Yeah.
I love it.
And on your show, there's 3 episodes that really stand out in my mind. In the first episode, I don't know the episode number, but
Me neither.
it was, yeah, you will when I say who it is. So it was the summer of 2020, and I was hiking on the AT, and I was climbing out of the James River footbridge. I was climbing out of there.
Okay.
And I said, I need to catch up on Paul's podcast, because that's really when I listen to shows, is either A, when I'm hiking, or B, when I'm in the car. And you had this photographer on, and his name was Seth Gabe or Gabe, and I'm going to get it wrong.
Yep. I mean, I still get it wrong.
He was incredible. I listened to that episode twice.
Really?
Yes, and
That's awesome.
I just listened to it back to back because how he talked about, you know, shooting wildlife, and you guys talked about cameras and the different lenses, and I like really geeked out on that. And then you shot a video with him. I don't know when you guys went over your camera gear, and then I don't know when this was, but you had 2 young ladies on that were fly fishing.
Yeah.
I don't know what you call women, fly fisher women. You don't call them fly fishers. Who knows? Fly fishers. And they were awesome. And that's really when with your show, I was like, Paul's really got something going here. I mean, just across the gamut of who you talk to and the incredible people you have on there. And then my third favorite is Derek Lugo.
Yeah.
And
He's awesome.
I actually saw or met Derek Lugo. He was giving a talk here in Charlotte about his book, The Unlikely Thru Hiker, at one of our local breweries. And I said, hey, listen, I just listened to your podcast with Paul. And he said, man, that dude is the best dude that ever interviewed me. And I was like, bravo, Paul. So there you go.
Well, wow, that's interesting. Those are 3 very unique episodes. I'm surprised you picked them. Actually, okay, so I'll go through those. Seth is one of my best friends. I mean, we met through the podcast. Again, he lives, 20 minutes from my house. He's an amazing wildlife photographer. He actually, this framed photo over here on behind my head, this little in the white frame, he actually took that picture. We went out and we do photography quite a bit. And actually, Seth actually went to Texas with me last year, and we're working on a little bit longer of a documentary. It's been a huge pain in the butt. Shooting longer stuff is definitely a different ball game than making shorter documentaries. So we're really working on that. But yeah, Seth's a great guy. I would encourage all of you, if you don't follow him, to go on his Instagram. It's just Seth Geib, Geib. It's his name, and he does amazing wildlife photography. And one of his specialties is he just like he really is good at photographing squirrels, and we don't have that much crazy wildlife up here in Northwest Ohio. I mean, we do have deer and ducks and all these birds that you have anywhere, but he just makes the most of it, and I love that in people when they just are like, this is what I got to work with and I'm doing it. I don't need to travel 10,000 miles to shoot a buffalo or something, which would be great to be able to photograph or take photography at that level, but he's just a great photographer and a great friend. And then Ohio Women on the Fly.
That's what it was. Ohio. I thought those 2 girls were incredible. And Carissa says, I'll put it back up there, anglers. That's what we call.
Yes.
fly fishers, fly anglers. There you go.
Fly anglers.
I don't know.
I don't know.
Anyway, they were incredible.
I have a fly rod, but I'm not very good at it. But yes, they're amazing. They do actually do great work. They get women involved in fly fishing in the outdoors because, you know, and I try and highlight this on my podcast too, is like a lot of the outdoor stuff is very like male dominated, especially when you get into like fishing and hunting and stuff. Like backpacking is a little more even keeled and like hiking and stuff. But when you get into the more intensive, like historically masculine things like fishing and hunting, it's like women are all often excluded from that conversation, and they're doing awesome work to just get women out there fly fishing, and they build a great community. They're just doing awesome stuff. They're a nonprofit. If you live in Ohio, especially like kind of in the Cleveland area, they're kind of based out of, I believe, just check them out because it's a great organization. I mean, I wish I could get involved, but I'm not on the right side of the fence here with that one. I'm a man, so I have to learn from other guys who are, cranky old men who like to fly fish. But they are a great organization. And then Derek, yeah, that dude is a trip. He is just always doing something. I'm always jealous of writers because I can't write to save my life. Aptitude Outdoors is no longer a blog. That's why I got a podcast, because I don't have to write. But he's a great writer. His story was very interesting, and that's something that doesn't get really. One thing is, I think people are scared to talk about the elephant in the room with a lot of these issues of like inclusivity out in the outdoors and stuff, and especially something coming from someone like me. They're always like, "Oh God, this guy, there's no way he cares about any of this stuff." And I have questions just like anybody else of like, why do you feel this way? What's the issue at hand? And like, we got pretty open about that on the podcast. I think that was a great conversation.
It was amazing. It was an amazing episode.
And I just was curious because I was like, who else could tell that story better than him? Because, he has like he's from the city. He's from New York City. How else, like what different of a place could you be from and then through hike? Like I'm from middle of nowhere, like Ohio, essentially. Like, and I grew up in Michigan, which is even more middle of the nowhere. And it was like, how different of a story from mine is just like your average white guy through hiking. Like that's very typical. And it was awesome to hear his story. And, go read his book. You can listen to the podcast if you want, but the book kind of tells it all. And I think that's just important to talk about. I think that all those issues that are jarring in society, I feel like you're only going to grow from learning about them. And if you're scared to ask that question, it's like, well, then you'll never know. And right. if it offends them, all you can do is be like, I'm sorry, I'm just curious. But 99% of the time, if you bring up harder topics, people want to talk about them because it's like frustrating, to live in that life and have these like really hard things to talk about and deal with. But when they're allowed to like say how they feel, I think it gives everybody a place at the table to like understand better, like why do they feel this way? And I think that's important.
Very important. And I'm going to bring up another topic. This is when I really, with your show, I said, Paul is like, he's going somewhere. It was episode 61, and it was a solo episode, which are very hard to do. Do. And you completely changed up your show. And the title of my season this year, season 4, is I'm titling it The Positive Impact Season, because one of the things I want to do is I've been doing this 3 years. You've been doing it 3+, and we could use our platforms to make a difference and showcase other people that are making a difference. And, my main focus is having on section hikers, but I want to go beyond that. I want to know what section hikers are doing out there. I want to share with people who I follow and who I enjoy and who makes a positive impact on me. And you've certainly done that with your episode 61, where you changed the trajectory of your show. And you said, going forward, I am going to talk about conservation issues, and I'm going to have people on that believe in conservation. So talk to us about that change, that turn.
Well, first, thanks for saying that. When you do this stuff, it just kind of feels like you're just speaking into the void. So like the fact that, people listen still blows me away. And I'm really appreciate that, people are at least, interested in what I'm saying, and uh, realizing that I'm trying to do something positive, because I just don't. I feel like a lot of the podcasts, obviously, I don't listen to the ones that are like that, but sometimes you get these podcasts and it's just like self-aggrandizing stuff, and I really try not to do that. I try and focus on like topics rather than me, because I don't feel like I'm that interesting, but there's a lot of interesting people out there. And over the years of doing the podcast and traveling and talking to so many people, there's one kind of theme that just kept coming up, which is, like habitat destruction, wildlife conservation, and, animal habitat getting ruined, and even issues like when they're trying to build that pipeline through the Appalachian Trail and just like level these forests and stuff. And it's like, what, even with a smaller platform, and like, I have a voice in the community, so it's like, why am I not using this to like try and at least spread the awareness that this stuff is happening? Like, collectively we can all do something to help fight this stuff, and I think knowing is half the battle, because there's so much information out there now about everything all the time. And I started talking more to like conservation organizations, and they kind of help funnel the information down to a more accessible and readable format. And then I try and just break that down even further to have the people that know a lot about this break this down on the show in a listenable format, because the minutia of conservation can be very boring. Like, a lot of these issues, you read them and you're like, I'm just so confused. But when you can have someone just like emotionally talk about it from their standpoint, it really kind of makes, in my impact to me, it makes me understand a lot better, and then people can understand that and decide how they feel about it. I've learned that it's a very I don't know, tough world, because everybody has their thoughts on how things should be done, especially with wildlife. And it's like, there's no best way. It's all about, getting this common ground, and just at the end of the day trying to save wildlife, which is now become like one of my life goals. I think it's like the only thing I can do as one person to like help propel that message and get it out there, because without these wild places, I mean, none of us will be backpacking. None of us will have all these awesome places to check out for absolutely no money, like these national parks and state forests and wildlife areas and all these rivers and places we're allowed to go. Without that, we can't do any of this stuff anyway. So I might as well like try and fight for that as best I can.
And one of the cool things on your show is, well, first of all, I should have said this. You have done a video version of your show from the beginning. And what I have found over probably the last 3 or 4 months is I enjoy watching podcasts more than I enjoy listening to podcasts sometimes, depending on what I'm doing. And that was one of the main reasons. Again, I'm behind the 8 ball compared to what you're doing, Paul, is providing video version. Number one, so the listeners can interact with the guest, because when it comes to podcasting, there is no way to interact with your host that you're listening to or the guest that's on the show. And you've done that from the beginning. What made you make that decision from the get-go? I
think I just like to make things harder than they have to be. I think that's part of my being, I think. But I just watched social media, because I'm not like, if you follow me, I post on social media. I try to post like 3 to 5 times a week, just so that, to like get the important parts of the podcast onto social media, because it's a completely separate platform from the audio. Like, the audio podcast is its own thing. I view it as completely separate from the social media side of things. And then like YouTube is its own thing. YouTube has its own audience. The podcast has its own audience, and then social media has its own audience. And rarely do you get crossover. Like, you follow me, Julie, specifically. You comment on my Instagram and my YouTube, and you'll follow me here and there. Like, that's rare. You have different audiences. And I was like, well, I just wanted to, like, if I'm gonna do this, I want it to be able to reach as many different people as possible. So I just made it as a video, and it was very steep learning curve, because I didn't really get really into video until probably around then. And when I was doing the TV show, I was like forced to learn how to do it because we had no budget. So it just kind of went from there. I was like, well, I have all this equipment, I might as well just do it as a video. And then this whole streaming thing is like, as we just realized, this can be a pain. So getting all that figured out and set up is usually half the battle. And then,
Yeah, but you know what? The audience held on. So thank you,
yeah,
thank you for all of that. And I think that's the
Sorry.
fun of it. I like that
Yeah.
the best, like the behind the scenes. Like if I'm watching somebody,
Yeah.
I'm like, that's cool. They're showing everything. You know, not everything's perfect.
It rarely is perfect, but yeah, I think the video part, it's just like, it's not, it takes away the anonymity of a podcast that's audio, because you can see the people. Like you can see who's the person that's talking, even if it's only you watch 20 minutes, you can still see the person. And I think that's just important. I'm a very visual person, so I'm like, I need to see who's talking. I
Yeah.
want to know what this person looks like. I always look up the authors of books. I'm just weird like that. Like, I want to know who this guy is. That's it.
All right, you guys, I just put in the chat if there were any last questions for Paul and from you guys, the audience. But I do have another question for you. How is it doing the solo episodes? Because I've often thought, hey, I could do some solo episodes. Are you like totally editing yourself like over and over? Because I know with audio, even like reading an intro or like an outro, I mean, I might read that thing like 10 times before I actually get a good cut. So how does that work?
With solo episodes, I usually will come here and I will sit in this chair and I will just fly off the cuff. I'll write an outline like I just think about stuff a lot. Like I'm always in my own head, just like, I wonder what this is about, or I wonder what that is about. And I was very nervous to do solo episodes. Like again, like I want my show to be focused on like the other people, but at some point there's only things you can articulate by asking questions. Sometimes you just need to turn it around and like how I think about things. And I just wanted to like start putting out solo episodes where I can relay like this distilled information I've learned over the years into like ideas on topics. Like the last couple ones I put out, one was like, I read this balance between like conservation and environmentalism, and also like understanding that you need equipment. So like I always wrestle in my head, like, do I need more gear, or is this just like a big charade? Because I know in backpacking specifically and hunting, you talk about gearheads. Oh my gosh, it's just like equipment. Like every year someone's buying like the newest thing. And I'm like, I'm still using my cook set from the AT in 2015. So I'm constantly in my head, like, does this matter, or am I making a bigger deal out of this than it needs to be? So the episode's kind of like a way for me to like work that out in real time, like my own therapist, I guess. And then it also is just like, I don't know. I don't really edit them. I'm kind of like one of those people that's just like, I just kind of like accept things the way they are. Like, I don't feel like, I'm not afraid to look stupid. I look stupid all the time. So if I say something dumb, I'm like, well, that's me. I'm just going to leave it in there. But
yeah.
They're fun. They're fun. I try to just jump into them. Like I'll write an outline and I'll be like, these are the things I really want to hit on. And I think about it, all this stuff all the time. So it's like, I don't really script it out. I'm just going to free flow with it. And sometimes they are not great. Sometimes they're okay. Sometimes they're decent, and whatever, it is what it is, you know?
And then you just roll with
Like
it.
the
I
trail.
think they're great. I think they're great.
Well, thank you.
We do have one question before I let you go here. So the Hammock Hangers podcast says, is there anything that you've learned about yourself from doing podcasting, or has it helped you in your everyday life in any way?
Yeah, I've learned a lot about myself. I've learned, that it's not always like, you don't always have to be concerned about doing everything 100% correct, especially the podcast. If you're talking for an hour with someone, I mean, there's going to be things that you just don't nail. You're going to forget questions. You're going to miss things. I mean, we do that in life all the time. I mean, you miss a piece of mail and they send you a fine or something for a parking ticket or something, and you're like, whatever. And it's just kind of like learning to go with the flow and not overthinking things, especially with podcasting. I mean, I would love to talk to somebody for 5-6 hours and just get down to the details and whatever. But sometimes you just got to like learn to let go and stuff like that. And podcasting is just a great way to meet cool people who do things that you like to do, or learn from people who you disagree with and why they think that way. Again, like on not that I disagree with Derek, but just in general, like there's been people on where I'm like, I don't really agree with the way you think, but that's totally fine. Like
Yeah.
we don't have to agree. It's great.
You know, we should do, okay, you just gave me an idea. I'm serious about this. We should do a podcast-a-thon where we have
Right.
on like, we could go live. So we could just rotate between people. So we could have on,
Let's do it.
I don't know. If we want to go, if minimally, what should we do? 3, 4, 5 hours? So we
That'd
need
be
5
fun.
people.
That would be easy.
Yeah. I think
We've
we should
interviewed
do
probably
it.
100 each. We're probably good. Yeah, let's go.
Yeah, let's
Anybody
do it.
want to go on?
Okay, podcast-a-thon.
Open
If you want to
forum.
come on, you got to reach out to me. I'm serious about that. I think that would be
That would be fun. I would agree.
And each of
Let's do
us
it.
could just, like, I could actually produce it on Ecamm, and it could be you and your guest and whoever, and I don't even have to be on there. I just have to be showing you guys during that. You know, I could get an hour, you could get an hour. We could have James on from the 46 of 46. He could get an hour. We could have Paul on from the Hammock Hanger. He could talk about hammocks for an hour. And then we could
Perfect.
do like an hour of Q&A where we're all on.
That would be great. I think
That'd be
let's
fun.
do
Let's
it.
do it. Yes. Okay. We just have to figure out the logistics. All right. So last question, besides the podcast-a-thon that's coming in 2023, what's up for Aptitude Outdoors? I guess number one, do you have any trips coming up, any backpacking, any hunting, and what's coming up for your show in 2023?
All right, that's a great question. So yes, I have a few trips coming up that I will likely make videos of, and I've slowed down. I used to try and put out a video like every week, every 2 weeks on YouTube, but I just kind of realized that I'd like to spend more time making like higher quality videos rather than just making them for the sake of making them. Because at the end of the day, I don't want to put out junk, it's my name going on it. So I want to make it as good as I can. It's the first day here in Toledo. It's been below freezing pretty much all year. So gearing up for ice fishing, that's probably one of my favorite activities. I love getting out on the ice. It's a little dangerous. It's a little fun. It's a little brutal.
You're nuts.
I'm insane, verifiably insane. So I got 2 ice fishing trips in northern Michigan booked. My friend and I are going on. There's every year I go to Texas for a podcast conference, for like a conservation oriented podcast conference. So I'll be back there likely this year or next year.
When is that conference?
It is in March or April.
Okay.
It changes every year, but it's like mid-March, late March, early April. And then other than that, I usually am just always doing something. Like if it's a nice day in the spring, I'll go fishing. If it's a nice day in the fall, I'll go hunting. If it's a nasty day in the fall, I'll go hunting, or I'll go up into northern Michigan and fish on the Manistee River, or down on the Maumee River, I'll go kayaking. If you follow me on social media, I'm always doing something. Like I'm going hunting after this podcast. So like my days are always jam packed. It'll be cold and nasty, but that's a whole nother topic. Food and hunting, that's a whole different world to live in than through hiking, which that's where I learned from Eustace Conway on the Last American Man book. I talk about that on my podcast all the time. That book inspired me. He was a through hiker, and then he was like living off the land, and I was like, I really like that ethic. I like that. So that's me.
Awesome. Well, Paul, thank you for what you do. Thank you for your show. Thank you for continuing to put episodes out there. I thoroughly enjoy them myself. And thank you to everyone who stuck with us on the live version of the show. If you guys want to check out Paul, you can find him on YouTube, Aptitude Outdoors Podcast. What are you on Instagram? Aptitude Outdoors?
Yep, everywhere. I'm on all the social medias.
All right,
all the
Paul.
things.
Appreciate you coming on the show. All right, you got Paul. Don't go anywhere. Don't hang up, because now that I got you, we can have a conversation afterward instead of beforehand. So
perfect.
All right, you guys, you know how this goes. Look at this fancy screen. I really appreciate you guys coming. Those of you that are listening to the audio version, thank you so much. Those of you that are watching the video, we appreciate you coming over to YouTube. And those of you that stuck with us live for this episode, you never know what's going to happen. So I'll keep you posted when we're going live next. You can join by subscribing on YouTube over at Julie Gayheart. Subscribe. I'm going to do it. Hit the bell notifications, all that stuff. And you'll know when we're going live here for the podcast. And as always, everybody, thanks for listening. Be safe out there and happy section hiking.